Okay, so we're going to talk about scope of an investigative detention. You will hear throughout this course the term scope being applied not only to investigative detentions, but later when we look at search warrants. But scope as it applies to investigative detention is a simple but important area to understand. Scope applies to the purpose of the initial stop and detention, and it applies to the time that is needed by the officers to accomplish the purpose of the stop. The easiest way to think about scope is considering a motor vehicle stop. A police officer is running radar on the highway and stops a car for speeding. No doubt the individual is detained lawfully for the purpose of the officer's investigation related to speeding. The officer approaches the car, obtains the driver's license, registration, and insurance card. The officer returns to his or her vehicle and writes out a ticket, might check the operator's license to make sure it's valid, make sure there are no outstanding arrest warrants. That's perfectly fine. The scope of the stop has not been expanded, but now the officer returns to the car. And while the officer is returning to the car, he or she decides that she's going to, or he's going to, ask the operator of the car for permission to search the car for any illegal guns or narcotics. So before the officer hands the paperwork, including the ticket, back to the operator, the officer requests the operator's permission to run a drug sniffing dog by the car. And the operator tells the officer that he or she will not consent to any further detention and requests their license, registration, and ticket. However, the officer continues to detain the operator of the car until another officer arrives with a drug sniffing dog. The drug sniffing dog walks around the car and lo and behold, signals that there are narcotics in the car. The officer then goes into the car, retrieves the narcotics, and arrests the driver of the car for possession of narcotics. Those narcotics will be suppressed because the detention exceeded the scope of the stop. If, in those facts, the driver consented, there's no issue. But once the individual is detained for a purpose other than what the initial investigation was for, or the time of the detention is exceeded, in order for the officer to lawfully further his or her investigation, any evidence that is seized as a result of that extended duration or purpose of the initial stop will be suppressed. We will talk about scope when we look at search warrants in the next module. But that is what scope means when it is applied to investigative detentions and is very important for you to understand. Thank you.